Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Hayden Clark Show. My name is Hayden Clark, your host, and I'm excited for today's show. But before we get started, I do want to say thank you for joining us. And if you like the content that you find here on my channel, you can support the show by going over to our Patreon website. There's a link in the description, or you can simply go to patreon.com/Hayden Clark and become a patron for as little as $1 a month. I don't post a lot of bonus content over there, so if I were you, I'd probably only give $1 a month as well. If, but anyway, you also hit the like button, share, leave a review if you're listening to the podcast. And now all of that crap is out of the way. We can get to the actual interview. I'm excited to introduce my guest today. His name is Sam Boyer-Groff, also known as the PrepMedic. Sam, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, and like we were talking before, I am excited to have you on. I'm very familiar with your channel as a paramedic student myself. It's been a lot of help, and like I said, your channel is not just recommended by other students, but I've even had instructors recommend that we go check out some of your videos. So yeah, man, I'm excited to have you on. But for those who may not be familiar with who you are, I thought it might be helpful to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Sam. I am a flight paramedic out in Northern Colorado. Do a lot of special teams stuff with my service. Have been doing it for a while with SWAT medicine, search and rescue, dive rescue, things like that. Really came, onto social media about 3 years ago now at my service and started putting out kind of junk videos every week, and somehow got a following and have tricked a fair number of people into subscribing to my channel and all of that, and now instructors are recommending me apparently. So with that, just kind of worked my way up, spent some time in law enforcement out in Iowa as a reserve on their SWAT team, then moved out here to Colorado to follow my wife, and the rest is history. We're ground and relatively new to the flight arena in the last about year and a half.
Yeah. Um, so tell us about the channel, what you do over at the PrepMedic, and just kind of how that got started and what the mission over there is.
Yeah, for sure. So my last service, we were in Central Iowa, and we were one of the only advanced life support services in a huge area. So we had, the city of Ames, which has about 100,000 people, and then we covered the rest of the county and a little bit of other surrounding counties. And we were super progressive there in protocols. Their pay still lacks a little bit, but we had a call. I think it was some kind of entrapment in like a grain silo where we ended up doing a rapid sequence intubation, which for people that might not know what that is, it's paralyzing somebody, putting them to sleep, basically anesthesia, putting a breathing tube down. We gave a ton of different meds for the entrapment, supported them for that long period of time. Then we had a really long transport down to Des Moines, and we got back to the station. So we were doing really cool stuff. We were doing really high level
Yeah.
medicine, kind of in the middle of nowhere. We transported down, everything was okay. The patient ended up being okay. We got back to the hospital and we had two open positions, and we had one applicant. And I think they were like generally a criminal with an EMT license there. So we were like, no, we weren't going to hire them. And so we had done these cool things and we had no applicants. I was like, well, there's no other healthcare profession that you can go out into the field and you can do these things. There simply
No, that's
isn't.
true.
And I was kind of discouraged by that. And it was really lack of knowledge. You talk to the average Joe Schmo off the street, and it's an EMT as a paramedic, as a first responder. There's really no difference in their minds. And there's a lack of understanding of what we do. You still get called ambulance driver and all of that,
Hmm.
when in actuality, your job is so much bigger. So long story short, from there, I had a camera I liked doing edits with, for like skiing and, stupid things I was doing. And I was like, well, why not start a YouTube channel? I don't really see that many medical YouTube channels out there, certainly not many run by paramedics. So I started doing that, putting out a video every week just in an attempt to, one, bring people into the profession, get more people interested in EMS and that training. And number two, help people be prepared in their everyday lives. One of the biggest helps in EMS is when somebody has already started things for you. You get up. I like to tell people I've never had a cardiac arrest patients survive that didn't have bystander CPR performed before we got there. So it's like
Right.
that preparedness and the ability to act is super important and can make a huge difference. So, wanting to get kind of the general populace a little bit of training, even if it's just a YouTube video, something is better than nothing in a lot of situations. And then that kind of evolved into, you have a lot of EMTs, wanting to be paramedics. You have a lot of first responders or volunteers that want to go professional, and kind of helping them through little topics, like shock or strokes or things like that, that they can watch a video, and get some education on it. And it's kind of grown from there.
Yeah. A lot of cops out there wanting to push Narcan. No, I'm just kidding. For all the cops out there. Uh,
I'm
but
not
yeah,
kidding.
man, I think but I do think you are achieving that mission. I mean, like I said, I'm far away from Colorado and far away from Iowa, and, I'm being recommended your stuff in my paramedic, instruction, so, and I completely support that mission. You're right. There's just, so much about this field that I don't think the general populace understands, and I say that because I'm new to the field and I didn't. I thought the same things as everybody else, ambulance driver, like you said. I may not have thought that, but like something along those lines. But you didn't realize that, wow, this is no joke. These are medical professionals, and they really make life or death situations, and they do the interventions themselves without, and not taking shots at anyone here either, but like without a doc. I mean, I know you can call the doctor, but most of the time you have standing protocols, and it's your decision.
Yep.
And that was eye opening to me. And I thought, because like a lot of guys like me, I'm on the fire side of things too. A lot of guys, I got into this for the fire, and then I was told I was going to paramedic school. Um, but I've learned to love it, and I mean, this is where the life-saving stuff happens. So I'm happy that you're doing it, and I do think that it's really working, man. So congratulations there. Um, what made you want to become a paramedic in the first place?
So in high school, I was kind of doing some soul searching, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I wasn't a great student. I wasn't dumb, but if I couldn't apply it to life, if I couldn't make it like some real world application of what I was learning, I didn't learn it. I didn't want to, I didn't have the drive to do it. And I also did not see myself in like a construction role or plumber or electrician. Nothing's wrong with those. It just wasn't for me. So I was trying to find something that had that mix of blue collar, white collar, and that had a skill that if I decided to leave the profession, I wouldn't have wasted my time. I would come away
Mm,
with something that was usable, something that would benefit society in general. And my grandfather was a physician. I knew a little bit about that, and I knew I didn't want to be a physician. It was too much. I didn't have the patience or attention span to spend
right.
15 years in school. Um, and kind of stumbled upon it. I was a ski patroller to start out with at a volunteer hill. And what's been most influential to me is the mentors I've had along the way and people that have kind of guided me. So I met a fire medic there and a career paramedic at a pretty progressive system. And they really kind of guided me towards this. I went through a firefighter paramedic internship live-in program where I lived at a fire station for a couple years. They paid for my EMT, paramedic, fire one, fire two, and they were giving me
That's a
my
good idea.
associate's degree. Yeah, it was great, and then you get work
I've
experience.
never heard of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you're running full-time calls, so, like, as I'm sure you know, is that experience is everything. So getting
Oh,
out
yeah.
and having like, coming out of school with 3 years of professional experience, um, was great. Now, they were giving me my associate's degree in fire science, and I kinda decided that I wasn't really into the fire side. It was fun. I liked, putting water on fire and crawling into a building and all of that when I did it. Uh, but I didn't like the rolling hose for the next 5 hours afterwards. Um,
Yeah,
and
it gets old.
and it just wasn't my thing, at the time especially, and decided to move out to Colorado and become a full-time, um, paramedic after my schooling. So, really, it was a good mix of that white collar, blue collar.
Mm,
You're in the trenches, you're working, you work hard, but you still have some of that white collar respect. You've got um, you're a medical professional,
yeah,
that still gets their hands dirty. So I
mm,
enjoyed that. That's why, I
yeah.
kinda went that route.
No, I really love that answer because I think it's, just so true. It's that perfect combination of, I mean, you're saving somebody's life, so it's, like, very tangible in that, what you're calling a blue collar sense, like, you really are working with your hands, but at the same time, an idiot couldn't do this or an idiot shouldn't do it. Like, you do have to think critically and hard. Like, critical thinking is, like, the number one thing that, like, my
Yep.
teachers are trying to teach to us. Like, you have to understand this from a holistic, almost like a doctor. I mean,
Mhm.
that's why it's called a medic, but, like, you really have to understand things or you're gonna make mistakes or at least not give the best treatment that you could. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And with the rolling hose party, I mean, I'm still young and I get tired of doing that,
Yeah.
um but we kinda touched on this a little bit already, but there's a lot of misunderstanding just even, as to what a paramedic is. So could you kinda talk about the different levels here, like, an EMT, a paramedic, a flight medic, just kinda or you even mentioned SWAT medicine, things like that. Like, what are all these different things and what do they mean?
Yeah, so the United States is kind of odd how we do EMS is we don't really have standard levels adopted by every state. So every state's going to be slightly different, but you do have an overarching organization called the National Registry, and they're a private organization that has basically tried to standardize scopes of practice between the different levels of EMS providers. So with that, you kind of start at the EMR level, which is the emergency medical responder. I think there might be a new name for them. They change them every couple of years and confuse me. And that's really like, a week, 2 weeks of class. I don't know the hour requirements, but it's pretty minimal. And they go through, your basic life-saving stuff. So a little bit of healthcare provider CPR, some more advanced airways. They go through, splinting, backboarding, things like that, that are really your kind of bread and butter, the start of basic life support. And it's kind of the basic of the basic life support. And then you move on to EMT. Now, EMT used to be EMTB, EMT basic, and they've gotten rid of that modifier at the end. It's just an EMT, emergency medical technician. And as an EMT, you're trained a little bit more advanced. And depending on the state, you might get some more scope. So you're still doing the splinting, you're doing the CPR, but now we're looking at, giving a basic pharmacology, aspirin, nitro, some glucagon sometimes, things like that. You learn a little bit more anatomy, physiology, a little bit more in depth in the trauma management, things like that, and assessment questions. I think that's the big one is kind of assessment and how to look at a patient and figure out what's going on with them. And that's really your first transport level. So if you are going to be on an ambulance, I think across the nation, there has to be at least an EMT on board the ambulance for that to be a legal truck. You can have an
Sounds right.
EMR driving and an EMT in the back, is generally what it ends up being. From there, you've got some mid levels. You really only have one right now. It's the AEMT, Advanced EMT, and this isn't used in many areas. We use it kind of at our service
Yeah.
because we run EMT paramedic, and a lot of them are advanced EMTs. But they kind of go into a little bit more pharmacology. The biggest difference, though, that you get as an AMT is you get to learn how to do an IV
Mhm.
and run some like sugar through the line and do things like that. But in my opinion, it doesn't increase your scope all that much. Now, there's people that
Yeah.
come out of the woodwork every time I say that and get defensive about
It
that level. But
the only
um,
advanced EMTs I know, at least in this area, are, like, older generation.
yeah,
Um, it seems to be, like, an older thing. I don't know why it changed, but in my thinking was, well, you might as well just go to paramedic school, but
that's
maybe
exactly what I think of. I think some states require you to be an AMT before paramedic school.
Yeah.
And I think you're able to cut down on the time that you go to paramedic school in
Oh,
some
okay.
places, but nowhere I've ever worked. So Wisconsin, Iowa,
Yeah,
and Colorado. Mm-mm.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so you used to have like I-99, which was this like kind of half step between AEMT and paramedic, and thank goodness that
Mm,
went away in most places, except Rhode Island, where you've got cardiacs and some other places. But then you have paramedic, which is really the highest recognized national scope of practice. It's the highest pre-hospital care provider you can be, and that really goes in depth into your advanced life support. So you're doing endotracheal intubation, which is a surgical procedure, surgical cricothyrotomies. You have a pharmacology, depending on where you are, between 30 and 100 medications you can give off standing order and carry. A lot of places can do rapid sequence intubation. You've got needle decompressions in the chest. Some places can do pericardial centesis. And you really just kind of take that next step up. You're doing 12-lead EKGs, doing diagnostics for cardiac conditions, cardioverting, like a lot of things. Your scope kind of takes this huge step up um, into that. And that's kind of your highest national registry level. But then you have some other levels beyond that. So there's IBSC is a board certification group, and they have specialty certifications for flight paramedicine, critical care paramedics, tactical medics, and you can go take those tests, be board certified in any of those, and those increase your scope in very specialized areas. So as a flight paramedic, I hold my FPC, my flight paramedic certification, and I'm board certified in that, which does change my scope a little bit in the state of Colorado.
In what ways does it change the scope? What does a flight medic can do that just a ground medic cannot?
I think, there's a plethora of skills you get with that here. And on an aircraft, when you're talking critical care, it kind of shifts your focus as a paramedic. So as a street paramedic on an ambulance, you're worried about the here and now because that's all you can be worried about. You've got a lot to do. You're looking at stabilizing that patient right there. You see a symptom, you treat it. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts with that. Bridging into critical care starts looking long term. It starts looking at longer transports. It's looking at where are they going next? What environment are they going to? How can we optimize this patient? Because we have kind of a 50-50 job where we'll go to scene calls. We'll go respond when either the transport's really long or an ambulance needs a higher scope or a higher level of care, or we'll go to rural facilities and transport super sick patients that already have treatments being done to them, and we need to
Yeah.
now upgrade that care or continue it. So as a I'm getting long-winded, like you said.
No, that's fine because that's the part that scares me. I'm like, I don't, that the interfacility transfers you're talking about, like once you get all that stuff on there. I mean, obviously, I would have to go to school to understand all that. That's why it scares me. But yeah.
Yeah, so like with that, we get like ventilator training. So as a ground
Mhm.
paramedic, most ground services are using bag valve masks. Ventilators are becoming more common, but still not super
Yeah.
widespread.
The ones we have are like super easy to operate. It's just like,
Yeah, and usually they're transport vents. They're like their
yeah.
tidal volume, their rate, and away you're off to the races. And
Mhm.
there's so much more that goes into ventilating a patient long term. And then we're looking at like balloon pumps, ECMOs, Impellas. You get training on some advanced procedures, chest tubes, um, things like that that
Mhm.
you just don't get exposure to as a 911 paramedic. And we have a saying, it's called four-wall scene call. We'll go to these small ERs in middle of nowhere, eastern Colorado. We're way up in the mountains, and they're technically at a hospital, but not really. Like
Right. We
these
got a couple of them around here. I understand.
Yep, you show up and, they've done things and you have to completely like reset and you have
Yeah.
to optimize that patient, get them sedated, get that tube in the right place, confirm things have been done, make sure the timing on the balloon pumps, and you just end up like running around with your head cut off, trying to get things kind of prepared. So that's really where most of the critical care realm comes in. Most of our scene flights as a critical care paramedic, you get a little bit more knowledge, so it helps. We carry blood products, so that's great. But most of my care is pretty similar to what a high functioning ground paramedic could do.
Yeah. Now, this kind of segues into the next question because, and I ask this just because I think more people are familiar with what a nurse is and what a doctor is than they are with what a paramedic is. But is it, I mean, how does what you just described compare to, or just paramedicine in general, I suppose, compare to what a nurse does? Because a
Yeah.
lot of that long-term care stuff you were just talking about that the flight medic has to take into consideration, I mean, it really sounded a lot like nursing.
Yeah, and it really is, and that's why we fly paramedic nurse, because I come from a pre-hospital environment where I know that environment, and then the nurse usually comes from the ICU where they know that area. So we like to compare nursing and paramedicine because it's similar amounts of schooling, it's similar scope of practice, everything like that. But I like to tell people that they're completely different jobs. Until you get to flights, they're a completely divergent set of skills you have. So as a paramedic, we don't have full autonomy. And anybody that says that a paramedic is completely autonomous and they don't do anything with doctor's orders it's wrong. We operate under standing orders. Now, what that allows us to do is we pick when to implement standing orders. And really, yeah, you're following an algorithm, you're going down the line, do this, do this, do this. But it's really not that cut and dry in the real world. You have to decide what algorithm you're gonna go to, what parts of that algorithm you're going to use, what applies, what doesn't, and which one do you have to jump to accomplish multiple goals, things like that. So we're still operating under physician orders, but they're standing orders. I don't call a doc, be like, "Hey, can I give this milligram of epinephrine? Can I start this
Right.
drip?" I can just do it if I think it's appropriate and in line with our standard of care. Nursing is a lot less standing orders. Now they do have it. ICU nurses can titrate like pressors within certain ranges. They can adjust vent settings. They can do all of that without calling the doc. But generally speaking, in the hospital setting with nurses, you have you're not really dictating the course of care. You're given guidelines within the course of care that's already been decided by the physician, and you can deviate within that, but you can't really decide like, hey, this patient needs an airway right now, or we need to do this with this patient. And that's usually up to the intensivist ER doc, whoever that is. So the advantage of nursing, you get paid more generally,
Hmm.
but also you are exposed to a lot more. Paramedics, I get this amount of stuff I can do. Um, and
Oh,
I don't
exposed
really,
to more medications and treatments.
yeah, medications and
Okay.
treatments. A nurse, like the sky's the limit, especially at these large
Yeah.
academic hospitals. Like they're might be seeing ECMO, they'll be seeing these different surgeries, procedures. They get to follow the patient from when they get admitted to discharge. They get to see the whole course of care, which provides a whole different educational experience than paramedics get. And, that was a huge learning curve when I got on the helicopter with nurses because we'd show up to these hospitals and they'd know they're like, hey, I see this patient in my experience, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, and this is probably what they're going to do in the hospital. And
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And,
No.
it's just different.
Now doing my, clinicals in the ER was like a eye opener to me as far as, I mean, my mom was a nurse, my wife is a nurse, so I felt like I was familiar with what nursing was, but yeah, it's very eye opening, especially like you were talking about, like the pharmacology side of it. I was just like, wow, there's so many drugs in this hospital, and I don't know what any of them are. Like,
Right.
I know what's on the ambulance, and which going through medic school, I felt like was a lot. Like, oh my god, I'm never gonna remember all of this. Couldn't imagine being in the hospital, but yeah, it's crazy. Um, I've always wondered though. I mean, you kind of mentioned it. I don't want to be um, whatever, but I've always wondered why they don't have more standing orders like we do. Like um, you know, I mean, I just said like they know more about pharmacology and stuff than I do, and yet I'm given all this autonomy. But I don't, maybe I've always thought there's got to I'm not that smart, so there must be a good reason for that, but I don't know what it is.
So and this is kind of just drawing at some conclusions here, but as a paramedic, there's only so much you know. Most of the time, like we on the helicopter, we can run labs on the helicopter. We can do some basic imaging, but generally in EMS, you can't image the patient. You can't run labs. You have a very limited window where you know things, where you can actually gather this data. So therefore, we have kind of this range of things that we do what's best for the patient in that with what we know. And the reality is we're wrong a lot.
Mm,
And that's acceptable because we're not expected to know that much. We're not expected to go in depth because we just don't have those tools. So we do basically what's best for most patients in most situations. And sometimes we're going to harm people. And inadvertently, it's not something that we might even know we've done. But then you get into the hospital and now you're making a treatment decision based off a CT scan, based off a full set of laboratory studies, based
yeah,
off of that urinalysis. And now your options are a lot more it goes from basically being a hammer to a scalpel, and you're going down, and the treatments are much more fine-tuned to those things and a lot more complicated in those
Yeah.
situations.
So
And
let's
really that's
slow down and
yeah.
okay.
We can't just hit like we're a very paramedics are a blunt tool. Um,
That's what I feel like. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You get, that patient in front of you that just
What are you
shot
waiting
their
for?
face
Just
off. Yeah, exactly. And, you basically it's like, "Hey, they're not breathing. Okay, I'm gonna cut their neck open." Where a physician's like, "All right, I have the option of cutting their neck open. I've got the glide scope. I've got this retrograde intubation. I have all of this stuff." Um, and that's going to change your treatment. And I just saw the comment pop up. That's absolutely right. You have our university hospital has I forget what they're called. They're a specialty team that runs up to the floor and helps floor nurses if there's a code going on, anything like that. And there is stuff in the hospital that they can do, and that's generally when the blunt instrument comes in. That's the ACLS. It's a very strict
yeah.
algorithm. Everybody should be following it. And you basically go step A, B, C, D. So that's my take on why that
No,
is
that
just because
I knew there
yeah,
had to be a good answer, and I knew I wasn't that smart, and honestly, that's a very good answer. Like, if you have the tools and the capability, let's slow down and really fine-tune the problem so that we can get the proper solution. Whereas me in the back of a box, it's just fast and dirty. Like, you're not
yeah,
breathing. Okay, here we go.
yeah.
I'm not gonna wait for some test or whatever,
It's exactly. And like if
because I
you
can't.
haven't done
Yeah.
have you done ICU rotations yet for your paramedic school?
No, we didn't. We honestly didn't do any. I just did ER.
So if you ever get the
I don't know if that was because
opportunity,
of COVID or what, but yeah.
yeah. And like honestly, COVID is a great learning experience for paramedics going up to the floor because these patients are so complicated. If you ever get the chance to go to an ICU and shadow nurses at a large academic center ICU, I mean, it's astounding. It is astounding what they're managing. So nothing I'm saying should be taking away from that as a profession, saying like, oh, they're less than paramedics. It's just a
Oh,
different
no.
job.
Well, I feel
And
exactly the opposite after doing my ER clinicals. I'm just like, "My god, I don't know how they do this."
yep,
Yeah,
and
and I'm not just saying that because my mom and my wife are nurses. They don't listen to the show, so it's not gonna give me any points.
well, and it's like, I almost quit. So I didn't almost quit, but I felt like quitting when I started this flight job. Part of the orientation process is doing ICU rotations. And my first one was up on their ECMO floor and it's mid COVID. And like I walked in and they're like, all right, like they see the flight suit and they see it says critical care paramedic. And like I thought I kind of knew things and walked in, they're like, hey, like go draw off this vamp, which is a very super simple thing. They do it 80 million times a day. I'm like, I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know what line that is. I don't know where to turn the stopcock. And I'm looking at this patient. There's 15 drips going, and there's this big machine they tell me is a ECMO machine, but I've never seen it. And it's a completely different world. And those ICU nurses are crazy. And the ones I work with, they know a lot of stuff in their realm.
Even stuff I thought that I might have the upper hand on, like, IVs or something like that, and these ER nurses just come in and just totally put me to shame. I'm like, "Okay, well," but I mean, I'm thankful for it because I learned a lot from those nurses, those 30-year nurses who can just come in there and, stick, an overweight, dehydrated, elderly patient like it wasn't nothing, and I was just like, "Damn, that was impressive." They're like, "Oh, yeah, whatever." I'm like, "Oh, whatever. I can't do it." So, yeah, a lot of respect for the nurses. Um, well, let's switch gears a little bit here. I didn't really have a segue for this, but, what's kind of, the best part do you do, ground paramedic as well? I mean, kind of the way you were talking, I couldn't really tell if you're full-time flight because a lot of guys down here will be, full-time on the ground, and then they'll work, like, part-time in the air, and so I didn't know what the situation was with you.
Yeah, so I'm full time. Flights is my full time job, or critical care
Okay.
is my full time job. We split between two assets. So every week I do a 24-hour shift on the rotor, and every week I do a 24-hour shift on our ground critical care truck. And
Okay.
then on top of that, we're the largest EMS provider in the state of Colorado. And I came from the 911 system that they run. So I will pick up shifts on the ground 911 side just for fun, and for some extra
Yeah.
cash here and there. So I still do
Cool.
kind of all facets of that. And then I work on their special operations team, which does SWAT, search and rescue, and dive.
Okay, so you've literally done everything. So, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the best part about, uh, pre-hospital medicine?
I really like the change of environment. And that's always kind of been what I like is that my days aren't planned out. I know I get to work at 7. I know I'm going to leave at or shortly after 7 a.m. the next morning. And what kind of happens in that space, it all depends. So, there'll be a day where I'll have watched 5 movies and just chilled with my friends because I love the people I work with. Or there are days where you're, flying, doing, interfacilities or scene calls. And that variety and that kind of unknown is really exciting to me. And it's something that keeps things from getting monotonous or boring every day. I don't have to go to the same, hospital every day, sit in the same chair, chart at the same computer. And granted, there's some of that, there's hurry up and waits, there's frustrations, there's things that I would change. But really, for me, it's that changing environment that is the best.
What's the worst part?
Oh, man. So the worst part for me has kind of changed over the years. So, the worst part while I was in Iowa, we also did IFTs, so interfacility transfers, and they weren't the
Mm,
cool interfacility
yeah.
transfers. They were,
I
granny to
started out with
nursing
a
home.
transfer company too, so
Yeah, and
as an EMT.
it's super valuable.
It is.
It's good for the community. It's a great learning experience, but I
It
didn't enjoy
sucks.
doing it. Yeah, it sucked.
The
So
fire
it
department I
started.
work for, we do transfers still even for the local hospital, but well, I don't know if I should say we don't take anyone there so that we don't have to transfer anyone out. Uh,
Yep. Yeah, and that was hard at first, and as I kinda grew in that, I started to enjoy the conversations with people, and I started to hate those kind of calls less because you'd meet some really cool people. I've had
yeah.
conversations with so many World War II vets that were on the beach of Normandy and doing, like, really cool things, so those conversations started to kind of make me enjoy it, and then, I got into flights. And now what I think is the worst part, not even something that I don't enjoy, but there are times, especially with some of these really sick COVID patients that we'll be picking up from a rural facility where we'll be on scene with them for 3-4 hours just trying to stabilize them enough to get them in the helicopter.
Bro,
And really what I've kind of experienced and what I've felt in those situations is you kind of feel like you're drowning because you're going nonstop. And now this happened. Now you have to hang this strip. Now we're transferring this line. And we fly in an A-Star, which is a very small airframe because of our high elevations in Colorado. And packaging those patients for transport, and you just kind of not hopeless, but you're just kind of sitting there. It's like we're the higher level of care. This ER couldn't handle this patient, and that's why they're sending it to us with us. We have all of these things we have to get done. They want us to be out of there. Like they're like, why are you taking so long? What's going on? Our care was fine. And I mean, the blood pressure of 60 and the PIP on the vent of 85 is telling me no, it's not fine.
man,
But those situations where you're just kind of stuck and you're hot and you're sweaty and it's midnight and you've got an hour flight under NVGs ahead of you and it just gets tiring.
yeah, for sure. I think I don't think I could ever be a flight medic. You were talking about something serious, but because where I work, we call for helicopters all the time. It's a very common occurrence because we're way out in the county, and like I was telling you before the show, the nearest level one is like over an hour away, and so for any major trauma or stroke or the nearest like holistic stroke center is just as far away. Um, and so we're on scene. They come get our patient, and the helicopter starts to take off. Then it comes back down, like hovers just above the ground, starts backing up. I'm like, what? I'm like, is this normal? I'm still new at this point. I'm like, is this normal? Because they're like, I don't know what he's done. Literally, I don't know if helicopters have reverse, but he reverses just above the ground, and then like slingshots himself. I think what he was doing was trying to get enough acceleration to go over these power lines. And I was like, "Oh, hell no. There's no way I would ever." I mean, and he did not clear them by as much as I thought he would have. I was like, "Oh, no, couldn't do that." Like, I don't like flying on airplanes. There's no way I'm getting in something like that. It's crazy.
So yeah, so what happened there is you get into what's called a hover hole. And helicopters, a lot of people don't understand that they actually work a lot like airplanes. Forward momentum gives you lift, and it's a rotor wing, so it's still a wing, and you still, if you have airflow coming on, you need less power to take off. On hot days, you have not as much air density, so it's actually a lot harder to hover and take off, especially with the patient. I don't know what it's like down in Texas, but I know a lot of our patients are not, 120-pound people.
No, this was actually in what I was thinking was we called for a specific we told dispatch we wanted a specific, company to bring the helicopter because we knew they had the larger ones, and they did
Yep.
not send that one, because this was not a small patient, but yeah.
Yep. So you actually need take landing zones. So you can hover, but you have no power. You can't pull more power. You can't pull more pitch into it. So they need that runway. So like in the mountains, especially for us, our pilots always look for an escape route where they can get that forward momentum. And it is kind of scary because there are times, and the pilots are professional. They know what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Um, they don't always communicate it with you when they're getting stressed out. So like you'll be like flying and they're like, all right, we just need some forward momentum, get over these trees. And you're like 10 feet off the ground heading right towards a forest. And you're like, I really hope we get that lift before we hit those things. And then
Dude,
all of a
that's how
sudden
I felt. I was like,
yep.
"Hope we can have MCI or, like, right here."
Yeah, I've had a couple white knuckle moments, that's for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure you have. Uh, would you recommend this field to young people? We just mentioned, some of the better aspects of this field, but, like, why would you recommend it as a career, if you would?
I would recommend it for the right person. This is a new profession. We're about 40, 45 years old in a professional aspect of EMS in the United States. There are areas where it pays bad. You're starting paramedics at a little bit over minimum wage, EMTs minimum wage. You're not making much money there. You went to school, you learned all these cool things, and now you're on a transfer truck in LA running 15 return to homes or dialysis calls. And it can really suck. If you're in the wrong place, it can really suck. And you get a lot of burnt out people here and there. So I'm not selling this right now. I'll sell it, I promise. But uh, you know, and that's frustrations with the profession. I'm sure most people watching have probably heard like some crusty guy say, "Don't get into EMSs, dead end profession. It sucks."
Yeah.
The truth is that it's like any other profession. There are bad companies, there are bad services, there are bad jobs you can get, and for a while, it was the predominance that's what most services were. We are starting to come of age. We're starting to be seen as professionals, as healthcare professionals. Um, the volunteer organizations where Billy Bob shows up in his flannel shirt and puts you in the back of the hearse vehicle and drives you to the hospital, those are starting to go away.
They're starting to,
Um,
but they're
they're still there. They are still there. Um, and with that, you're getting better pay at the right services. You're getting more recognition. You're having more career development options. For me, I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things within this realm. And the pay is starting to get there. So if you are a young person, you want something that's changing, that you can have a hand in shaping and in moving forward, and you are willing to do some research, move, relocate,
Mhm.
be picky, and you aren't just kind of in one place and you have to get on this one fire department to be happy, then I think this profession is a good one for you. If you
Yeah.
are stuck somewhere and your options aren't good and there's like one company in the area that could possibly give you a good living, or you're just a toxic person, like that's nothing against people. Some people just have a lot of complaints.
Yeah, and then they probably won't be happy anywhere, so
You're Yeah, you have to kinda bring it with you, and you have to keep a good attitude. So,
yeah.
this was kind of a disjointed answer, but I think
No,
the
yeah, it's a good
person
answer.
yeah, the person that's got a good attitude, that's willing to work hard to better themselves and to get somewhere, I think this is a good profession for them.
Yeah, what I always tell people, like, "Look, you can." And I waited too long to do this because I was a stupid younger person. but, like, I coulda graduated high school at 18 and been a firefighter paramedic. I'm on the fire side of things. I could have been a firefighter paramedic by the time I was 20, and, so the fire departments around here actually pay I don't know what it's like in Colorado or other places, but I live in the North Texas area, and if you wanna get paid well, it's more than likely going to be, at a fire department. There are some county EMSs and some private EMS that pay decent, but typically, if you really wanna make money, it's gonna be at a fire department, but,
Yeah, and I can touch on that. Like, it gets into TMI, but we're so closed off about salary and stuff that, I want people to have realistic views, is that there are places in Colorado that pay their paramedics like 16, 17 an hour. Um, Down south, especially these private services. I'll tell you, my service, we're EMS only, we're hospital based. And we're starting our paramedics at like 26, 27 an hour,
well, dang. Yeah,
with
okay,
some
well, that's good,
experience.
but that sounds is that rare or is that
No, there's a couple that'll do it. Like Denver Paramedic Division starts their people off at about 29 an hour. You get into the company, you come in with experience. You know, you get into flights, you're making 35, 40 an hour. So like there's money to be had. Are you gonna you're still not rich. Like, yeah,
right,
at $40 an hour, you're still not rich. But that's, I mean, I don't care who you are, that's a living. Like,
right,
that's,
yeah.
you can raise a family on that. You
Yeah, if you
can
wanna
have
get
a
rich, you're
home.
gonna, start your own business or something. I'm talking about, like, a living, yeah.
Exactly. Now, you do have, like, I think if you were to average the state, like, your fire departments are still making more. South Metro, down in Denver, if you have a bachelor's degree, you're paramedic, and you're Fire 1, Fire 2, I think you're coming in at 120
Yeah,
salary a year. And, other places are like 80, but I make more than our firefighters in our primary response district doing
yeah,
what I do in EMS strictly.
yeah. Here's a question from the comment section. I'm not gonna, pull it up, it's a little longer. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with the thought that you are allowed to be there with a sick person and can do things and ask questions that normally only family members would be privy to?
That's a good question. And it's something that's not thought of a lot. It's something that as a new paramedic, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
And when I realized it, it kind of scared me as a provider.
It's just I've
Um,
had the same thought, so that's why I wanted to ask it, yeah.
yeah, you are privy to very private moments, very kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, sacred moments,
Mhm.
of death and of extreme hardship, extreme pain. People at their lowest, and you're privy to that as a paramedic. And that comes with a huge responsibility. And then beyond that is like when I was first a paramedic, I was looking at my stuff, I was like, I can do these things, so I'm going to do them. And then you realize like what that means,
Yeah.
like what that will mean for the patients. Like your decision in the ambulance or in the aircraft, wherever you are, can make a huge difference down the road for that patient years later on your decision, and what you're doing. And that shouldn't scare you into paralysis with that patient. It shouldn't scare you into not being able to act. But that again is a huge responsibility. So I guess, yes, it can be very overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean,
Usually,
who am I just gonna open my door and just be like, "Yeah, come on in, let's" I don't even know who you are.
yep. And in like Australia, they call their paramedics, it's their most trusted profession as their little like tagline, because you are in their environment. We're the only healthcare provider that can see people in their environment in emergent situations. So, I can see you see people very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um, and if you're not trustworthy, if you're, being rude or anything, because it's the third time you've seen Miss Smith this week and you're just mad and stuff, like, you have a huge impact on people emotionally and physically. And you've got medical responsibilities, you have emotional responsibilities, you have spiritual and religious responsibilities. Um, whatever those might be, uh, they're on you and you're it. As a paramedic, there's really nobody that's coming to help you out in that situation. So yeah, it
No,
can be
yeah, that's
really,
the
really
motto.
overwhelming.
No, no one else
Yep.
is coming. We are 911. Yeah, but I was just thinking about, you were talking about, I get to do all these cool things, and then you think about what that actually means for the patient and stuff like that. Um, when I was and it's a common thing, and I get that it's not coming from a bad place, but whenever I mean, I would say the same thing too when I was I'm still new to the field, but even newer, I would say the same thing. Like, I hope we get a good call or something like that, and then you think about what that means. You're like, what's a good call? Like, am I talking about something traumatic, something, and then you run a couple of those calls and you're like, you know what? Maybe I'll just stick with the old lady that stubbed her toe. That wasn't so bad after all. Um,
There is something profound though about, you those crappy things are going to happen
yeah,
everywhere. And they're going to happen whether you're there or not.
exactly.
And most of the time, I get kind of tired of providers that kind of go like, I'm a hero. Like I can make the difference, because most of the time what you're doing is the exact same that any other paramedic would do in that situation. It's the
Right.
exact
Yeah.
same. And
We all went to school. Yeah.
yeah, we all went to school. We all follow the same like protocols, whatever.
Basically.
The
Yeah.
provider that I want to be, and the provider that I'm continually striving to be, and I fail at regularly, is I want to be the provider that if it wasn't me, the outcome would have been less favorable. That is, I have a knowledge above and beyond, and I have compassion, and that affect, and to be kind of above the rest. And it's not putting anybody down, but it's I want to be somebody that stands out in that field for kind of knowing what to do or being able to say the right things like
Mhm.
that. And that's the kind of provider that I strive to be, not that I'm not always.
No, I think that the correct word there, the one that makes the biggest difference, because like we were saying, we've all been to school. We know what the protocols are basically the same. I mean, there's going to be differences here and there. I think the correct word that you used was compassion. Um, just because that makes all the difference in the world. And there's too
Yeah.
many that don't have it. And because if you make a mistake on protocol or on treatment and it's an honest mistake, like we can fix that. Like, it's just a knowledge thing. But if you don't have compassion, you don't actually care about these patients, and you're thinking, Jesus Christ, I got to wake up at 2 a.m. and go deal with chronic back pain guy or whatever. Uh, go
When
do
you have to
something
look
else.
at
You're not even making that much money. Go do something else.
exactly. And we see those people, and anybody in the profession knows those burnt out people that are swearing up a storm when they get a call.
And they're
They're mad.
contagious.
And I won't lie, like I don't like getting that flight 5 minutes before I'm supposed to
No,
get
of
off
course
shift.
not.
I don't like coming home 5 hours late. But you have to care about people, and it's not about saving lives. Like that's cool when you get to do it, when you get to do something that truly makes a difference. But most of the time, it's just taking somebody and making their day a little bit better. Like
Yeah,
it's a
but
bad situation. They're not going to die. No matter what I do, they're not going to die. But I can make them a little bit better. I can talk to them about their grandkids, or I can give them a little bit of pain medicine to help take the pain out of that chronic back pain, or, whatever it is. If you will never be disappointed if your only goal throughout the day is to make somebody's day better.
yeah, exactly. Because I mean, that's probably how you get burnt out, is just wrong expectations. Like, I'm gonna go be, rescue Randy and saving people left and right. It's just that it happens, but it doesn't happen that often.
Nope. Not even in flights, not even
Mhm.
when you're called to like quote the most serious things. Like those patients that you truly make a difference on long term, are few and far between.
Right, because like I said, most of the time we call for a flight is because I'm not allowed to drive an hour and a half out to the level 1. And even not everyone who needs a level 1 is dying. They just,
Yep.
they're hurt. They need a level 1, but sometimes they're dying, and
Sometimes.
it makes a big difference. But this kind of segues into a question I had, and I want to be careful the way I word it. But it's talked about a lot more nowadays, and it was a big topic in school, which is, we were just talking about dealing with, dying patients and things like that. There's a lot of traumatic events in this field, obviously, and it doesn't even have to be someone who's dying. Trauma is different for everybody. Um, but could you just explain why taking care of your mental health, that's the phrase that always gets brought up, your mental health, it's such an important aspect of being a paramedic, and kind of what advice do you give? Or if you're willing to open up about it, what do you do to monitor and take care of that side of things?
So I need to preface this answer by saying that I've never struggled with mental health
Yeah.
in a serious long term way. I've had bad days, I've had, seasonal blues and things, but I have never suffered from PTSD or from really getting messed up on a call. I've known a lot of providers that have. So either I just haven't hit my trigger because everybody has a trigger, or I've just done an exceptionally good job of taking care of myself and I don't even know it. But I guess what I would say is that if you can't take care of yourself, I think there's a saying, it's like, physician, heal thyself first. If you can't take care of yourself, how can you be expected to take care of other people? And a provider struggling with mental health issues is not going to be the most effective provider on the street, and or not struggling with mental health, because a lot of people are and are great providers, but more so if you are in a crisis, you are going to be hard pressed to care for somebody effectively also in a crisis. For me, the best strategies I can say to take care of mental health are to have support systems in place. And that sounds cliche. And not even official support systems. Like, we have peer support, which is great. We have, counselors you can get, which is also great. And you have to be able to take those official avenues. But for me, the biggest thing has been to, you run a bad call with that fire department or that crew or that partner. And after shift, doesn't matter what time it is, doesn't matter what other things you have to do. It's like, hey, let's go get some nachos. Let's go talk about it. And let's just talk about kind of how we're feeling, what we could have done better, different, like not laying anybody on blast, not debriefing the incident officially, but just talking about what that meant to us. Has made a huge difference. And, being able to just go have a beer, not 8 beers, a beer, two, and hang out with friends and have people that understand what you're going through, because there are a lot of people that don't understand, your spouse, if they're not in the medical field, you come home and you're like, oh my gosh, we had to RSI somebody today. And they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And it's like, well, no, this was like a big deal. This
Yeah, stressful.
felt
Yeah.
huge to me. It was stressful. And people can on the surface be like, oh yeah, you coded a kid. Like that sucks. I can totally see how that sucks. But like, they weren't there, hearing the parents cry, and, they weren't there for the tactile feel and the smell and the temperature, like all of that. So having somebody that's been there, that you can kind of relate to, that you can share your experiences with, that understands what you're going through, to me, I think that's huge. And then, of course, being able to, take the, professional route. If you really, if, you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling like way overwhelmed, being able to reach out and having a counselor, a psychiatrist, peer support, official avenues is also important.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that response, and I appreciate having you on, Sam. I want to respect your time. That's all we got for today, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, if you like the content, you can hit the like button, subscribe, leave us a review if you're listening to the podcast. And if you're feeling really generous, again, you can head over to the Patreon website. There's a link in the description, and become a patron supporter over there. Also, Sam's YouTube channel, the PrepMedic, is in the description as well. Follow the link and be sure to subscribe over there. Even if you're not in the medical field, there is a ton of really cool videos over there, whether you're just interested in how we do things or how the guys in the air do things or whatever. Sam's got a lot of cool content over there, and he's got videos for just the average person who's not in the medical field, that you can take that knowledge and apply it to your lives as well. Sam, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me.